In 1971, the dollar was worth 1/35 of an ounce of gold. Now it's worth about 1/1800th. The dollar has lost a lot of value, so that's a lot of risk.
What is the proper relationship, what should be the proper relationship between a chairman of the Fed and a president of the United States?
Well, first of all, the Federal Reserve is an independent agency, and that means basically that there is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take. So long as that is in place and there is no evidence that the administration or the Congress or anybody else is requesting that we do things other than what we think is the appropriate thing, then what the relationships are don't frankly matter.
100 years ago, the United States Congress created a central bank. It was actually our third attempt at that. Today, we know it as the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States. What most people don't know is that the bank isn't a federal entity, and candidly, it has no reserves.
Milton Friedman was an ardent defender of the free markets and a watchdog against out-of-control government spending. He was the first to say that what the Federal Reserve does matters, and matters a lot. He turned conventional economic thinking on its head when he argued the central bank was responsible for the Great Depression by keeping the money supply too tight. In a speech some 50 years later, Ben Bernanke, now chief of the Federal Reserve, wrote, "I would like to say to Milton, regarding the Great Depression, you're right. We did it. We're very sorry. But thanks to you, we won't do it again."
So what exactly is the Federal Reserve? Well, to begin with, it is a private bank that serves as the exclusive bank of the U.S. government. Though it was created by Congress, the Federal Reserve does not answer to Congress. The president himself does not have direct oversight. So what else does the Fed do? Well, the Fed regulates financial institutions, manages the nation's money, and has incredible influence over the economy. The Fed can raise and lower interest rates. In fact, they are the only entity able to do so. And that's a very big deal, because with that power, the Fed is able to control the U.S. economy, can cause the life savings of Americans to lose value through inflation, controls the value of your investments, even impacts employment rates and manufacturing outputs. An awful lot of power for an entity that has no accountability to the U.S. people.
The Communist Manifesto is the handbook of all Marxists. In it, Karl Marx outlines the steps necessary to communize any country. In the fifth step, he says this, quote, "Centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank with state capital and an exclusive monopoly," unquote. The purpose is so that the government has total control over the economy. The only difference between Marx's fifth plank and the Federal Reserve is that the Fed is privately owned, but it surely controls the economy of the United States.
I think that right now the question is, do we all work for central bankers? That's what I want to address to our guest tonight. Is this global governance at last? Is it one world, the central bankers in charge? Jim Iuorio, you say we've got some downside here, a correction in the markets. Fine, but aren't we all just living and dying for what the central banks do? Aren't we all just counting on the fact that there's a Bernanke put and that we won't go any lower than, say, 5% down from here?
Of course we are. Congress, in essence, has ceded total control of the value of our money to a secretive central bank. Congress created the Federal Reserve, yet it had no constitutional authority to do so. We forget that those powers not explicitly granted to the Congress by the Constitution are inherently denied to the Congress. And thus the authority to establish a central bank was never given.
Well, in America today, we are getting closer to fully exposing the greatest con and cover-up in the history of this country. It involves our banks, the Federal Reserve, our Congress, and of course, you and me.
What on earth has the government done to our money?
A famous central banker once said, quote, "If you give me control of a nation's monetary system, then I care not who writes its laws." In the United States, we have the rule of law. It's the Constitution. The Constitution guarantees that if you own property, which includes money, the government cannot just take it from you or diminish its value. The same Constitution guarantees that the government will not interfere with contracts you've signed and economic agreements you've made. And the same Constitution guarantees a free market economy. And a free market economy is one where producers of goods and services have as few barriers as possible to trade with consumers and no barriers from the government.